let's talk about illustrated books today. Hello everyone, my name is Aneta, I'm an artist illustrator and welcome to my channel. I started collecting art books more mindfully around 9 years ago. 2 years ago I made a video about my favorite art books at the time, but looking back, let's just say I'm not exactly proud of it. It felt awkward and I didn't say everything I wanted to. I also held back a lot because I was too scared of sharing too much or being too personal. I thought people wanted straightforward art book reviews, not my reflections. Then, last summer, I discovered a channel called Josie Makes. Josie creates cozy, whimsical, artistical content, and it's not just about painting and drawing. Sometimes she's crafty, sometimes she shares the struggles of being a creative person, and she does it all with a great honesty and a sense of humor. Channels like hers are hard to find these days. Go check her out, I'll leave you a link in my description. Among her videos two stand out, where she discusses her favorite art books, and what struck me most was her honesty about what she appreciated in them. She didn't just share what she liked, she connected these art books to her own artistic journey, making her reflections both personal and inspiring. It made me realize that if I enjoyed her videos, it probably means I shouldn't be afraid to put more of myself out there. I guess we all want to connect in some way. We all have stories to share and we can be interesting to a group of people, regardless of how small or big our following is. I also realized how hard it is to find art book reviews that go beyond "this inspires me, I love this artist." I always want to ask, but how does it inspire you? What were your aha moments? How did it shape your work or made you the artist you are now? Well, Josie's videos answered those questions for me and I found them so inspiring. Today I want to share something similar but in my own way. I'll be sharing a mix of art books, although there are probably more illustrated books here and also a graphic novel. This isn't about reviewing these books per se, it's about what they've meant to me personally. I'm really excited about this format and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. The year was 2001 and we all knew something big was coming. I remember the hype, it was everywhere. The media couldn't stop talking about it. Around that time, my dad borrowed the centenary edition of The Lord of the Rings from one of his colleagues at work. And that was when I saw Alan's Lee illustrations for the first time. Especially this one, I'll show it somewhere. Obviously, I don't remember what I exactly thought in that moment, but I felt something like I'd stepped into a world that I somehow understood, a world where I belonged. Do you know that feeling of longing when you see something so beautiful and evocative that you just don't want to leave that moment? It's bittersweet, but that's exactly how I felt. And well, maybe that's why I love drawing tall white women to this day. To be honest, I didn't actually read the book back then. I focused entirely on the illustrations because at the time the descriptions of Shire seemed boring to me. It wasn't until a few years later that I fully appreciated the story and the trilogy as a whole. But those illustrations stayed with me. Let's talk about sketching for a second. It's really at the heart of everything, but I feel like we forget how important it is. We get so caught up in chasing the final polished product that sketching becomes this quick throwaway step, like, oh, I'm just thumbnailing or tossing out ideas. And unless you've studied art formally, sketching doesn't usually get the love it deserves. It's interesting when you think about it. Sketching is such a powerful way to refine your understanding of values and master grayscale. Whenever I sit down for a sketchbook session, I like to flip through this book from time to time. It helps me set the right tone and often inspires me to add more storytelling to my spreads. It's not something I always aim for, and I don't always get it right, but when I put real effort into a spread, I notice that I capture more details that often find their way into my future work. Alan Lee's sketchbooks are a treasure to me. His ability to sketch anything fantasy related is just on another level. Whenever I get stuck, like figuring out how to draw the texture of a tree, I flip through his work. What I love most is how these books are laid out. They're not just packed with his sketches from The Lord of the Rings, but also these personal reflections that make them feel so much more meaningful. There's this raw honesty in every page. It's not all polished, perfect work. You see little doodles and random notes like how he organizes his day. It feels real, like you're peeking into his creative process. Then there are his watercolors. Don't even get me started on those. They're stunning. It's no surprise Peter Jackson leaned on him so much. Those watercolors perfectly capture the heart and the soul of Tolkien's world. In this sketchbook, he also shares insights into the colors he uses and his overall technique. His art has a way of calming my mind and letting my imagination flow freely. It's like stepping into a dream, and I never want to leave. If you follow my channel, you've probably heard me mention her before. She's an Italian artist who also teaches at the Idea Academy in Rome, and honestly, attending to one of her workshops is a dream of mine. It's not entirely out of reach, but it would take some planning. It's not just the workshop cost, I'd also need to organize my stay, travel, and everything in between, which adds up. Plus, she doesn't host workshops all the time, so it's about finding the right moment when everything lines up. Still, it's a small, achievable dream that I'd love to make happen. Why her though? What's so special about her work? Well, she completely changed how I think about illustration. I know not everyone will agree with me on this, but I believe that before simplifying illustrations, it's essential to study thoroughly from life, understanding forms and the basics before you start breaking the rules. Take someone like Picasso, for example. He didn't start with the abstract style we know today. His early works, like his academic paintings, were incredible, showing his solid foundation in traditional techniques before he evolved into the master of abstraction. That's why I think mastering the basics like drawing, composition, and form gives you the tools to create anything, even simplified or abstract work. I'll admit, I'm not a fan of every simplified illustration I come across. Sometimes I can tell when an artist skipped foundational studies and jumped straight into creating simplified forms. When I look at Isabella Mazzanti's work, it's clear that she has a solid grasp of her basics. Her understanding of colors and values is brilliant. She knows how to use them with such depth and precision. I also admire the way she handles lines in her illustrations. There's such elegance and purpose in every stroke. And because I'm a fan of darker Gothic styles, her art feels like it's tailored to my taste. It gives me everything I love, that slightly haunting yet beautifully feminine vibe that's just so pleasing to the eye. And of course, characters with long hair as well. What makes this edition special though is how it's filled to the brim with Mazzanti's illustrations on nearly every page. Whether it's a detailed full page illustration or a subtle ornament or a small symbolic detail, everything in this book has a purpose. In many books, ornaments are purely decorative, but here, every single detail reflects and enhances the narrative. Some of her ideas are incredibly unique and creative, and achieving that level of thoughtful design is no easy feat. I also love that she chose to work exclusively in pencil grayscale. It adds such a timeless quality to the illustrations. To me, this rendition of Carmilla feels definitive. I can't imagine this book illustrated any other way. Of course, not everyone will agree, and that's fine. That's why there are so many different editions out there. But for me, this one is a perfect match. This is a book I picked up late last year, and it's a part of a series. To be honest, the written content didn't really stand out for me. I don't mean to offend the author, but I found the historical research on ghosts pretty surface level, Wikipedia style, nothing you couldn't easily find online. That said, I didn't buy it for the text, I bought it for the illustrations. The book is a mix of traditional drawings, delicate line work, and intentional, almost ethereal watercolors. I'm especially grateful for the format, as it lets me really study Isabella's lines up close. This is to me the perfect example of how we should approach art and inspiration. I don't aim to imitate her, or any artist for that matter, but this is exactly how you absorb inspiration, noticing the details, the choices, the little risks they take. For instance, have you ever thought about pairing this shade of lilac with this type of green? I hadn't, but look how beautiful and eerie it looks. I visited an exhibition in Ferrara which focused on Giovanni Boldini's relationship with the high fashion of the Belle Epoque. This exhibition was particularly special as it took place in Boldini's hometown. Now, I won't dive into his biography, you can explore that yourself, but for me, Boldini is one of those artists who made portraiture, especially of women and fashion, incredibly dynamic and exciting. There's something about the shapes he created, his brushwork, and his overall technique that feels so ahead of his time. And in fact, he was criticized a lot because of that. I love attending exhibitions, especially when they feature 19th or early 20th century oil paintings. That era of art was full of experimentation, which explains why so many of those artists are still beloved and celebrated today. This exhibition wasn't just about paintings, it showcased beautiful fabrics alongside those massive, breathtaking works of art. I remember being in awe of how much presence those paintings had. It's the kind of experience that stays with you. You walk out of the exhibition and can't stop thinking about it for days. That was in my case at least. And now, 6 years later, it still feels like yesterday. He started off as a traditional classical painter, focusing on studying the human figure, light and color during his time in Florence. But over time, he developed a style that was entirely his own, something that made him truly unique. What makes Boldini stand out is the way he captured fashion in his paintings. He painted faces, hands and bodies with such precision, but the way he handled fabrics was something else. Loose, almost abstract, yet perfectly readable. The exhibition also had a collection of his sketches, from intricate studies to quick thumbnails. Each one was a glimpse into his creative mind, showing how he played with line, shape and color. For me, Boldini's work perfectly blends technical mastery with expressive freedom, and that's what makes it so unforgettable. I've collected a lot of books illustrated by Benjamin Lacombe, probably around 70% of what he published. Over time, I've developed a kind of love, but sometimes disappointed relationship with his work. I think that's normal when you've seen so much of someone's art. It's clear that some projects mean more to him than others, and I feel like I can tell when he's genuinely enjoying what he's doing versus when he's just delivering what's needed for a job. Of course, that's just my personal take. I understand that clients call the shots. One book that stands out for me is Marie Antoinette, The Secret Diary of a Queen. Lacombe's books are always beautifully made, and just holding one feels special. What makes this book even better is how perfectly the illustrations fit in the story. It's based on imaginary letters between Marie Antoinette and her mother, plus diary entries. So the letters are fictional, but they were written in a way that feels historically accurate and true to the characters. The book is full of variety. Some illustrations are inspired by the art styles of Marie Antoinette's time, while others feel more playful and experimental. You can tell Lacombe had fun mixing things up. There are polished, detailed pieces done in gouache and oil paint, along with simpler sketches and soft watercolors that match the muted tones of the era. The colors, though, are consistent throughout, pulling everything together beautifully. Even the way the letters are printed adds to the mood. They're set against parchment-like backgrounds that make the whole thing very immersive. For me, this book is a great reminder that creativity doesn't have to follow just one path. When you're working on something historical, it's not just about showcasing your personal style. It's also about connecting to the context and finding ways to adapt your approach. Speaking of Benjamin Lacombe, let's talk about Alice in Wonderland. I think we all need our own version of Alice in Wonderland. This book has been illustrated by so many artists, and it's such a lovable subject to work with. With so many editions of Alice in Wonderland, we can allow ourselves to choose the Alice we pictured when reading it for the first time. I have the original version of the book with the original illustrations, a small pocket edition that I love. It's always on my desk. But I also have these two books illustrated by Benjamin Lacombe, Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. His illustrations look almost exactly how I imagine my Alice, and the mood of these books makes them even more special. Just like with Carmilla, I enjoyed every little drawing on almost every page, which adds such a playful energy to the illustrations. There's definitely a very personal touch to them. Again, both books have these moody illustrations that play beautifully with all the margin sketches, and you can really see how much they experimented with different font sizes. Some illustrations even become part of the spread. I love that mix of innocence with a gloomy, almost gothic feel. It fits the story so well because while Alice is often romanticized today, The story itself, it's actually pretty dark. Sefirot or Sefirot, I don't know. The art of the game. This is the book I bought for the illustrations, but I appreciated the written part as well. It contains detailed explanations and the thinking process behind those illustrations. This art book was a part of a Kickstarter campaign I didn't participate in. I wasn't interested in the game, and there was also a tarot deck that came with it, but when someone matches a tarot deck with a game, it usually screams to me poor quality paper. I know, I'm very specific about this. I don't want to sound negative though. Those guys did a great job after all. I just didn't feel a connection with it. That said, I follow Liv Tanner on Instagram and I love their style. You can see the solid foundation behind their drawings, and the simplicity and color palette are just stunning. It's hard to achieve that balance. Plus, they managed to capture so many symbols and details in these cards without over-cluttering them. This book was an extra from the Kickstarter campaign. It's not as beautifully refined as other books, and it had this awful chemical smell when I first opened it, but the smell is gone now and I love it. I enjoy flipping it through, especially when I need to get into that explorative mood of refining a concept. Faeries of the Faultlines. Faeries of the Faultlines. It's just that title. This is a well-known book and many of you might already have it in your collection. For a long time I debated whether or not purchase it, but eventually I decided to treat myself and I'm so glad I did. I also debated including it in this video, but ultimately it earned its place. I'll admit I'm not fully aligned with Brian Froud's approach to envisioning creatures, and Iris Compiet follows a path that echoes his style. However, we need weird creatures in our lives. Beauty often hides in the strange, the ugly, and the whimsical. Iris doesn't claim to have invented these creatures, she documents them. In fact, I'm convinced one of them lives under my bed. He eats dust. This guy. My husband confirms the information. The book is beautifully curated. I love the writing style, the choice of fonts, and of course, the sketches. The artwork carries an explorative, almost otherworldly mood. Iris' use of watercolor is effortless and you can tell it's her medium of choice. I admire her approach because it's something I struggle with myself. Personally, I tend to be overly controlling with watercolors, constantly tweaking with my brush instead of allowing the medium to do its magic. Iris' work inspires me to loosen up and embrace the unpredictable beauty of the process. One thing I hope for in the future is that she'll share more of her full illustrations in future art books. Her fantasy landscapes are so atmospheric, they draw you in and make you feel like you've stepped into another world. My favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. This is a discovery I made last year and it's a graphic novel. Now, for those of you who struggle with perfectionism or feel the need to always produce high quality work, well, chill out and grab this graphic novel. First of all, I need to mention the author, Emil Ferris. She's an American artist, and before I got this graphic novel, I listened to numerous interviews with her. She's such an inspiring, kind personality, and there's so much wisdom in everything she says. And that's exactly what this comic book offers, her entire self. I'm not going to give you details about the story, though it's very engaging and introspective, and I love the main character, but go check it out for yourself. The style is amazing. First off, we have these notebook grids everywhere. Now, this was added later, but as far as I understand, she actually wanted to draw on this type of paper. And then you see a variety of styles that shift from very accurate, realistic drawings made with colored writing pens to pages that feel almost like scribbles. Like she had one of those I don't want to draw today kind of days. Yet they still deliver the message and push the story forward. Sometimes she's cartoony, sometimes realistic, and yet when you look at the whole thing, it all makes perfect sense. This is no easy read. It took me about 3 evenings to finish it. I could have read it faster, but I was genuinely overwhelmed by the amount of illustrations, and I often found myself just staring at one illustration or composition for a long time. The message is powerful and sometimes tough to digest. This year I'll probably get the second volume. I need to know how the story will evolve, but I'm not a massive reader of graphic novels. I do have some, but I'm pretty picky. I usually go for stories that have perfectly executed, well-colored pages and great drawings. And my favorite thing is Monsters doesn't completely align with my usual taste, and yet it's probably one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. And with that being said, I feel tired. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Take care.